This is how the U.S. is using its oil. You've been told that America is losing. The petrodollar is dying. OPEC is calling the shots. China and Russia are building a new energy order that cuts the United States out entirely. America's addiction to oil is a vulnerability, a weakness that rivals are exploiting to drag it down from the top of the global order. That's the narrative the mainstream has been selling you. Then, here's what is actually happening. In 2026, the U.S. crude oil and petroleum product exports hit nearly 12.9 million barrels per day, a new all-time record. LNG exports averaged over 16 billion cubic feet per day, the highest in American history. In March 2026 alone, LNG exports set an all-time monthly high as Asia and Europe turned to the United States to replace supplies disrupted by the Iran conflict. America is not losing the energy war. America is winning it, but methodically, strategically, at a scale and speed that has no precedent in modern history. And it is using oil and natural gas not just as fuel, but as the most powerful geopolitical weapon on the planet. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand why whoever controls energy controls the world. And right now in 2026, America controls the energy. Welcome to Your World Exposed, where we take the story the mainstream gives you and shows you the side they deliberately left out. Subscribe right now and hit the notification bell. We cover this every single week. Drop a comment when this video is done. We read every single one. Let us get into it. To understand how America is using its energy dominance in 2026, you need to understand how it got here, because the road to this position was never supposed to happen at all. For most of the 20th century, the United States was the world's largest oil producer. Texas, Oklahoma, California, American oil fueled 2 world wars, built the interstate highway system, and powered the greatest economic expansion in human history. But by the 1970s, American production had peaked. The wells were aging. The easy oil was gone. And in 1973, OPEC made its move. OPEC cut off oil exports to the United States in retaliation for American support of Israel during the Yom Kippur War. Gas lines stretched around the block. The economy buckled. The President of the United States went on national television to ask Americans to turn down their thermostats. That was the moment America realized something terrifying. It had become dependent on foreign oil, and that dependence was not just an economic problem, it was a national security crisis. For the next 40 years, American foreign policy was distorted by that single vulnerability. Wars were fought. Alliances were made with governments that shared none of America's values. Trillions of dollars were spent keeping shipping lanes open in the Persian Gulf. American soldiers died on foreign soil to protect the flow of oil that kept the global economy running. The price of dependence was measured in blood and treasure. And then, almost by accident, everything changed. The shale revolution. If you want to understand America's energy dominance in 2026, this is where the story really begins. Not in a government strategy document, not in a foreign policy office, in the Texas desert with a wildcatter named George Mitchell who refused to give up on a technology everyone else had written off. Hydraulic fracturing. Fracking, combined with horizontal drilling, finally worked at a scale in the early 2000s, and what it unlocked was not just a new oil field, it was a new America. The Permian Basin in western Texas, the Bakken Formation in North Dakota, the Eagle Ford Shale in South Texas. Formation after formation, play after play, America was sitting on top of one of the greatest hydrocarbon reserves on the planet, and it only just figured out how to reach it. In 2008, the United States was importing about 13 million barrels of oil per day. A decade later, it was a net exporter. By 2025, it was producing 13.6 million barrels a day, nearly double its previous peak in 1970. And accomplishing this was 5% fewer active rigs than the year before, because American drilling technology had become so efficient it was producing more oil with less equipment than at any point in history. The Permian Basin alone accounted for 48% of all U.S. crude production in 2025. One basin in Texas producing nearly as much oil as most OPEC nations. But the production numbers are only the beginning. The real question is not how much oil America produces. The real question is what it does with it. Let us start with Europe, because this is where the strategic use of American energy is most visible, most consequential, and most underreported. In February 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. And in doing so, Vladimir Putin made what may be the single most catastrophic strategic miscalculation of his career. For decades, Russia had used its natural gas exports to Europe as a political weapon. The pipeline was the leash. European nations that depended on Russian gas, Germany, Italy, Austria, Hungary, found themselves unable to take hard positions against Moscow because the cost of doing so was simply too high. Their factories ran on Russian gas. Their homes were heated by Russian gas. Putin believed that dependence made Europe permanently compliant. He was wrong, because within months of the Ukraine invasion, American LNG was already rerouting to fill the gap. Europe received 68% of all U.S. LNG exports from January through November 2025. 68%. That continent that Russia assumed was locked in was replaced, pipeline by pipeline, tanker by tanker, with American gas. Gazprom's exports to Europe collapsed 44% last year alone to their lowest levels in decades. The weapon Putin had spent 30 years building, the energy leash he used to keep European governments compliant, was neutralized by American shale gas loaded onto tankers in Louisiana and Texas. And the Trump administration locked it in further. The Turnberry Agreement committed $750 billion in European energy purchases from the United States over 3 years. That is not a trade deal. That is a security architecture, a permanent dollar-dominated replacement of Russian energy dependency with American supply. Russia's most powerful geopolitical weapon neutralized, not by military force, by American LNG. And then came 2026, and the Iran conflict made everything even clearer. When Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz and global energy markets went into crisis mode, the United States did not panic. U.S. crude and petroleum product exports hit a record 12.9 million barrels per day. LNG exports set an all-time monthly high in March as Asia and Europe scrambled for reliable supply. Jet fuel exports surged 78% year over year. Diesel exports rose 19%. The Iran crisis, designed by Tehran to hold the world's energy supply hostage, ended up demonstrating something that no press release could have communicated as clearly. When the world's most critical waterway closes, the world calls America. Not OPEC, not Russia, not China's state energy companies, America. A country with a flexible private LNG market, the swing exporter, the one with export terminals coming online throughout 2026, Corpus Christi Stage 3, Golden Pass LNG, Port Arthur LNG, adding capacity at exactly the moment global demand was screaming for supply. The U.S. Department of Energy said it plainly in February 2026. America is the world's largest oil and gas producer and the leading LNG exporter. And 2026 is on pace to build on every record set in 2025. But here is the layer the mainstream never takes you to. The mainstream has been telling you the petrodollar is dying, that China is settling oil trades in yuan, that the dollar's reserve currency status is under threat. Here is the reality. America no longer needs to protect Middle Eastern oil fields to maintain dollar dominance. It is the oil field, its own production, its own LNG exports, its own trade deals. All denominated in dollars. Every LNG tanker leaving the Gulf Coast is a dollar-denominated transaction. Every barrel of American crude sold on the international market is priced in dollars. The yuan settlements you keep hearing about are mostly happening between Russia, Iran, and China. 3 sanctioned or isolated producers whose combined market share is shrinking. The yuan is no deep bound market, no rule of law backstop. no reserve currency infrastructure that makes it safe for global institutions to hold a scale. The petrodollar is not dying. It has a new engine, and that engine was drilled in the Permian Basin. And the strategy goes deeper still, because what America is doing with its energy is not just economic, it is military. Energy is the foundation of military power. Every tank, every aircraft, every ship, every logistics convoy runs on fuel. For decades, the U.S. military's single greatest strategic vulnerability was fuel supply chains that ran through regions it could not fully control. American energy independence changes that equation permanently. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve is being refilled. The Energy Department awarded contracts in late 2025 to replenish reserves drawn down during previous crises. A full reserve backed by the world's largest domestic production base means no adversary can use an energy embargo to pressure American military operations. And beyond the reserve, American production means that the United States and its allies can weather any energy disruption adversaries attempt to create. When Russia cut gas to Europe, American filled the gap. When Iranian mines threatened global oil supply, American exports hit records. When Venezuela's production collapsed, American output ensured global markets barely noticed. The world's swing producer, country that fills the gap when supply is disrupted anywhere on Earth, used to be Saudi Arabia. Today, it's the United States. That's not just an economic advantage. It's a military and diplomatic superpower, the country that can keep the lights on for its allies when adversaries try to turn them off, holds a form of power that no aircraft carrier can replicate. Now, let us be clear about something, because this channel does not do cheerleading, and a complete picture requires honesty. American energy dominance is not without real complications. The climate implications of record fossil fuel production are serious, and they're not going away. The energy transition is happening, and the tension between expanding oil and gas production and the global push toward renewables will define energy policy debates for decades. Domestically, lower oil prices are a double-edged sword. They benefit consumers at the pump, but they reduce producer margins and can discourage the investment needed to sustain future production. The plateau in production growth analysts are tracking through 2026 is partly a result of this dynamic, and there are limits to energy as a diplomatic tool. Europe is acutely aware that replacing one energy dependency, Russia, with another, the United States, creates its own vulnerabilities. European countries are accelerating their transition to renewables precisely because they do not want to be permanently beholden to any single supplier, including America. These are real constraints. Any honest analyst has to include them. But here's what none of those constraints change. The country that controls its own energy supply controls its own destiny. The country that supplies energy to others controls theirs, at least in part. In 2026, the United States is the world's largest oil and gas producer. For the 9th consecutive year, it's the world's largest LNG exporter, with 16 billion cubic feet per day flowing to markets in Europe and Asia, and exports forecast to exceed 18 billion cubic feet per day by 2027. It is trade deals that tie European, Asian, and global energy security directly to American supply. It has neutralized Russia's gas weapon in Europe. It has given its allies the energy security they need to stand firm against authoritarian pressure. And in 2026, when the Iran conflict threatened to hold the global economy hostage through a 2-mile waterway, the world did not call OPEC, did not call Russia, it called American tankers, American export terminals, and American naval power to keep energy flowing. That is not a coincidence. That's a 50-year transformation of American vulnerability into American dominance, powered by a wildcatter in Texas who refused to give up, scaled by a shale revolution the world underestimated, and weaponized by an administration that understood energy is not just fuel. America turned oil from a vulnerability into a weapon, from a dependency into a dominance. The petrodollar is not dying. It has a new foundation, and that foundation was drilled in the Permian Basin. Whoever controls the energy controls the world. Right now, in 2026, America controls the energy. This is the world exposed. The story is never what they tell you it is. If this changed how you see American energy and what it actually means for global power, drop a comment right now. Tell us, do you think America can hold this position for the next 20 years? Or does the energy transition eventually change everything? We want to hear where you stand. Do not forget to hit subscribe because we are just getting started.